A very good evening, everyone. Hope you all are safe and doing well. Thank you all for enrolling in this event. Excel and Excel welcomes you all. For those of you who do not know about Excel and Excel, here's a gist. Excel and Excel is a data analytics firm that solves high impact business problems using data and technology. We provide end to end services in the field of data analytics and data visualization. Our core services include analytics, consulting, and training. Excel and Excel presents the popular talk show EiEFreshTalk on its YouTube channel, where it hosts great leaders and subject matter experts in various fields from India and abroad to speak regularly on a variety of topics ranging from Excel to analytics and finance to financial modeling and many more. We are happy to share the first ever annual gathering of Microsoft Excel Global Community. It is planned from 6th to 9th February 2021, the Global Excel Summit, a 4-day event with 17 plus speakers and 1,000 plus attendees. Learn from the top Excel practitioners in the world, connect with people in all lines of business, and last but not the least, excel with masterclasses. We are proud to share that Excel and Excel is associated as media partner for the Global Excel Summit. Use our promo code Excel and Excel and get special prizes on various products and courses. Joining us today, we have our speaker for the day, Mr. Shaam Ramamurthy, who is an analytics consultant with an emphasis on data visualization. He has over 20 years of experience across the globe. Sham completed his MBA at Whitman School of Management at Syracuse, New York, specializing in supply chain management. Sham is a co-founder of Wilson Consulting Private Limited, where he consults on visual analytics, visual scorecards, dashboard design, and data storytelling. He also conducts corporate trainings on analytic topics. Sham has a strong passion for teaching and teaches at universities across the USA, India, and Italy. He is an adjunct at IIT Madras, IIM Calcutta, IIM Trichy, IIM Ranchi, Great Lakes Institute of Management, SP Jain School of Global Management, and Syracuse University, where he teaches data visualization, business analytics, and marketing analytics at various levels. We welcome you, sir. It's a pleasure having you with us. Before we begin, I request participants to join me in welcoming today's speaker with a hi in the chat section. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box. We will later present it to the speaker. Over to you, sir.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Erlinda, for the great introduction. I couldn't have done better. So you guys pretty much know about me. So let's begin. Our topic for today is the science of visual analytics. Right. So when we talk about visualization, right, most people I talk to about visualization, most of them think it's about creating pretty charts. They think it's about creating graphics. It's about creating things that are nice to see, but nothing can be farther than the truth. Right. So when you're trying to visualize data, one of the things you have to keep in mind, which is kind of non-intuitive, is there's a science behind how we go about creating visuals. And today is my attempt to kind of give you guys a high-level overview of the different components of the science of how you go about looking at visual analytics. I will be using the popular visualization tool Tableau. Just because it's easy to use, it's drag and drop, point and click type of a software. So you do not need to write a single piece of code. So that's one of the reasons why I chose this tool. So we'll the aim of this talk is to give you all two things. One is conceptually, you would get a framework of what are the different components of the science of visual analytics, and the second component is a good introductory overview of Tableau software. All right. So let's then begin. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I generally don't like to have a lot of words on my slides, but I wanted to start off with the 7 steps of visual analytics, which I think I have come across in my years of experience, either while teaching or while consulting. So almost everything that we do in terms of creating visuals is going to fall under one of these 7 steps. So this is my framework that I pretty much follow, whether I do my consulting work or whether I teach students on how to understand visualization concepts or a tool. I pretty much cover these 7 steps. So let me just quickly give you a brief overview of what these 7 steps are. So the first one is cognitive perception. When I think about cognition and perception, so this is something to do with the brain. So this part of the science deals with how your brain capitalizes on its strengths. There are some weaknesses of a brain as well. So creating visuals, or the science of creating visuals, is to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of creating visuals that make use of the weaknesses of a brain. The second part is visual clutter. So think about what clutter is. So clutter is junk. And if you apply it to data and visuals, visual clutter, anything that you see on the screen on a visual that does not belong where it should, is essentially clutter. Right? Too often we focus, if you want to highlight something, for example, right, we tend to add a color to it. We bold it, we underline it, we italize it, we add a frame to it. All right. In fact, you should be doing the opposite. You should be taking away things that really don't belong, so that what was remaining is just the business question that you're trying to answer. The third component is choosing the most appropriate display mechanism. So what I mean by this is, when you create a visual, you have 4 choices. You can either create charts, you can create maps, you can create glyphs. Glyphs are, so think of glyphs as quantitative ways to encode shapes. So using shapes to encode quantitative data. So those are glyphs, like infographics. The fourth component is tables. All right. So these are 4 components you're going to be using when you're creating a visual. So understanding when to use what is the science behind choosing the most appropriate display mechanism. All right. Dashboards. Everyone knows what dashboards are used for, and so on. Right. So just by putting things together on a single display does not constitute a well-designed dashboard. How do you design dashboards? The science of creating dashboards. We'll touch base a little bit about that in terms of layout, structure. What do you think about what do you think when you create a dashboard? How do users view a dashboard? Is what this part of the visual analytics science is about. Visual exploration is one of the most underrated parts, wherein you all must have heard about EDA, right? It stands for exploratory data analysis. So visual exploration is the visual aspect of it, bringing in that visual element. And this to me is one of the most underrated aspects of visualization. So when you look at objects or images, your brain processes a lot of information really quick. So visually exploring a data set is going to be faster than most traditional EDA methods. Sixth one is visual analysis, where we talk about slightly more advanced types of charts, where it takes a little bit of understanding, but then once you get it, you can really visualize large amounts of data using simple charts. Last but not the least, storyboards. 2 components to storyboards. One is the actual structure behind how you create storyboards. There are linear sequence, a narrative, and the other thing is, behind every visual that you create, every dashboard, every table, even every single graph before you publish it, think about what is the underlying story behind creating that visual. So the reason why I wanted to start out with these 7 steps is, whatever we're going to be doing for the next few minutes or hour or so is going to fall under one of these components. All right. So I want you to understand the science behind why we're doing something. There's a very specific reason why we do certain things. All right. So let's open up Tableau. So I'm using Tableau Desktop. So when you open Tableau Desktop for the first time, this is how your screen is going to look like. Again, I'm assuming that most of you are watching this video have never ever used Tableau before. So that's the assumption I'm going to start off with. All right. On the left side are data sources that you can connect to, file sources, or server-based sources. So file sources are things, think of these as anything that sits on your local PC or local desktop. These are things like your text files, your Microsoft Excel files, your Access databases, and so on. You can also connect to a server. So under more, so these are native connectors. So meaning Tableau gives you the power to connect to some of these data sources automatically. So you click on this, all you need to do is just make sure you have login credentials and the server credentials, and you should be able to just connect to it and just view the data readily. So Tableau keeps adding to these data sources after every update, but they have a pretty comprehensive way of pretty comprehensive collection of how we can connect to multiple data sources. You can connect to Oracle tables, SQL tables, Hadoop systems, and so on. All right. So let's connect to an actual data set and see how it looks like. So I'm going to click on Microsoft Excel. All right. So that's the file I'm going to be connecting to. And if I click on Excel, again, I'm going to navigate to the folder where I've saved the data. And let me actually quickly walk you through how the data looks like in Excel. So this contains a retail type of a data set, right? Like a superstore type of data set. Every record is a serial number that contains an order with a product that's been sold. All right. So we have the order ID and the serial number of that order ID, and then the order date is displayed, the ship date, and then also some information about customers in terms of what the customer ID is, what the segment of the customer is, the location of the customers, all right, city, geographical data. And it also has information about products, where it talk about creating subcategories of products or categories of products, a product ID, the product names, and then some quantitative measures. So it's the last part where they talk about the sales, the profit, discount, and quantity. It's a pretty comprehensive data set where it contains multiple quantitative measures as well as qualitative measures. All right. So this is the data set we're going to be connecting to. So if I click on the actual data set, and all I need to do to import this data inside of Tableau is connect to it, click on it, and click on open. It's going to open it up. So it takes a few seconds. So once it's done, what you're seeing here is a preview of the data sets. So this is going to happen by default. Tableau is going to show you the first 1,000 rows of data. All right. So this is your data set. So once you have a preview of the data set, it also gives you some information about the metadata. So what I mean by metadata is the data type or the data characteristic. So if you notice, some of these have ABC, some of these have a calendar icon that corresponds to a date, some of these have a number sign, a numerical sign, which corresponds to a number, and so on. So this is pretty important for Tableau to understand, because the science behind creating the different types of charts is going to depend significantly on what the incoming data type is. So once this looks good, we are actually going to go to the main worksheet. So I'm going to click on sheet 1, and it's going to come up to this point here. All right. So this is where most of the magic happens. All right. So this part here is where you're going to start seeing visuals and tables and maps start popping up. Okay. If the main interface here, it contains some menu-driven options, typical to what you see in a standard software package, like file-based. Whatever you want to do with file, you can find it here. You can connect to a new data set and so on under this menu. Whatever you can do with the worksheets, it contains here, and so on. All right. And it also has columns and rows. So this is where we're going to actually drag and drop what we need to visualize. It also has a ribbon. Think of this as a visual of the most commonly used menu options. All right. So just like most software products, this also has redundancy built into it. So meaning you can get to this in this quick menu option, but it also can find these in your main menu options as well. So some of these, which I commonly use, is this text label, show mark labels, right? So what this will do is it's going to add data labels to your graphs. The other thing I tend to use more commonly is also this sort option, sort descending or sort ascending when you want to sort the data from high to low or low to high. I also like this feature, which is the swap option. So this is basically going to swap your data set into rows and columns, right? So basically think of this as changing your axis, right? And then it also has options to save your workbook right from here. And these two arrows that you see here are really a godsend, right? So especially this back arrow, again, this is really what this back arrow means is undo. So if you've done something and if you have no idea about what you've done, this is a great way to backtrack your steps. This is almost like taking you back in time, right? So this is like magic. So apparently Tableau supports unlimited undos. My personal best is about 45 or so. So that's how many mistakes I've done, and I wanted to go back. So that's kind of what my personal record is. But apparently it supports multiple undos and redos. All right. Right. So these are typically your quick menu options. And on the left side, you see names of my columns popping up. So these are the data sets. These are the column names that are imported from my data sets. And if you notice, there's a small line that separates these two sets of data. So think about what is common to all of these columns versus all of these columns. So all of these columns, they have ABC or a lat long indicator. So these are all dimensions. So wherein you're thinking about categories of data, if you think about categories, what they really are, they are attributes or categorical data. So if you want to slice and dice your data by a specific attribute or a category, that's what this is. On the bottom side, with the numerical sign symbol, these are actually measures. So measures are things that you can aggregate your data. So typically they are numerical values. They are quantitative in nature, but most important, the true test for whether a variable is a measure or a dimension is if you can do a sum of something or an average of something, the aggregate, if the aggregate makes sense, then it is a measure, right? I will say this multiple times. All right, I've never, whenever I teach or whenever I consult, I keep telling this to anyone I meet. Tableau is just a tool. It cannot think. We have to do the thinking. All right. So simple case in point. So all these are numbers. Discount is a number. It has a pound sign. It is a number. It's automatically, Tableau is intelligent enough to automatically put this into measures. So is profit, quantity, sales, but look at the serial number. So serial number is that unique identifier for every record on my row. It happens to be a number and it has a number sign, but think about whether it's really a measure or not. Right, so again, remember back what I told you to how to test a measure. A measure is something that you can perform aggregations on. If you sum of serial number, average of serial number does not make sense, hence it does not belong to a measure. So this is really a dimension, because if you think about a serial number is an attribute, is a label that you give. So when you encounter things, this is almost the first thing you have to do whenever you input a data set for the first time. Got to quickly scan through the data set, so make sure the measures and dimensions are grouped accordingly. If you find an example like this, all you need to know, or all you need to do is click on this. I'm going to click on the serial number, drag and drop it, and just place it anywhere on the dimensions area and let go of my mouse, and serial number goes back up. Right. The other thing I want you all to note here is these marks cards. So these marks cards are ways to customize your data set. So we can vary our data by color, by size. We can add custom text to your data sets. Detail, I'll explain with an example in a bit. Tooltip, right? So tooltips, this is one of the most interesting components of storytelling. So one of the most underrated aspects of storytelling is to add that visual narrative. So tooltips is one of the simplest and yet most efficient ways to communicate stories through data. I'll show you how you can actually customize your tooltips and come up with a great, powerful narrative. So also, as we start creating visuals for again, whenever I introduce Tableau for the for users who are looking at it for the first time, this is how I describe it. So think of Tableau as Excel pivot charts or pivot tables on steroids. That's kind of how I would describe Tableau to a first-time user. So all you're going to see on the screen, whenever I start adding, dragging, and dropping, you're going to see aggregates. You're going to start seeing data aggregated automatically, almost like how you would create a pivot table or a pivot chart. So let's begin. Let's create our first visual. I'm just going to drag and drop, right? So I'm going to click on category, all right, category, and drag and drop it, place it onto the column shelf, all right. And once my mouse is over here, I'm going to let go of it. I get my first view, right? And then the next thing I'm going to do is I need to display it with a measure. So let's look at sales, for example. I'm going to click on sales, drag and drop it, place it onto the rows shelf, all right? And I let go of my mouse, my bar chart is created. All right, and think about what this bar does. So let's get the labels on. All right, I'm going to click on the one touch menu option where I can click on labels. It's going to put the labels back on. So this 836,154. So think about what that really is. So that's the sum of sales for technology. All right, so it's automatically doing a sum. So like I said, this is it automatically aggregates, just like how it does, how you do create pivot tables. All right, it's a sum of sales for furniture. All right, the other thing I also want you to notice the order with which it's arranged. The order of the bars: furniture is first, followed by office supplies, and then by technology. This is alphabetically ordered. Most businesses don't care about which alphabetical products they sell first and so on. Rather, businesses are interested in questions like, what are my top 5 products? What are my bottom 5s in terms of sales and so on? So whenever you look at a bar chart, whenever you see a chart with one dimension or one measure, always make sure you either sort it from high to low or low to high. All right, so I'm going to use this quick one touch option. It's going to sort from high to low. All right. If I want to sort it from low to high, I can just click on this option. That's going to be descending, an ascending sort. All right, low to high. Okay, so you can toggle between these two. So that's one thing. The other thing I want you to notice is the way that the label is displayed. Right. So technology, furniture, office supplies, these get cut off. So how would you account for that, or how would you make sure that the labels are not cut off? All right. Few options come to mind. So one is I can extend the label, the bars, the size of the bars so that my labels are fit. In this case, it works out okay because I just have 3 bars. But what if I have 20 bars, 30 bars? That's going to be a problem. The other option is, you know how Excel has those, those angles that you can tilt, but I don't want my end consumers to tilt their head like this and read my labels. All right. So there's just so much I can force them to do. So think about what other options there are. I can put them on labels. That's going to be too cluttered. I can remove the labels, put them on a tooltip. That's again going to be cluttered. But one simple solution in this case is I'm just going to click on this one touch swap option. This is going to swap my axis. So my sales goes into the x-axis. My categories will go into my y-axis. Notice what happens if I click this. From a vertical bar, I switch to a horizontal bar. All right. Now, for most cases, think about what a bar chart does. The length of the bars give you an indication of the magnitude of the data. Bigger the length, greater the sum of sales in this instance. So both vertical bars and horizontal bars pretty much do the job for you. So you would prefer horizontal charts in scenarios like these, when your label is too long to read or too long to be fitted into your screen. You can just use something like this. All right. So that's one aspect I wanted to show you real quick. All right. So let's create one more visual. So when you want to start creating other visuals, just like how you can, again, if you're used to Excel, just like how you can add new tabs to Excel, you can also add new tabs to Tableau. All right, or these are called worksheets. So click on this plus icon, and that's going to add one more sheet to this. All right, I'm going to create a pivot table or a pivot summary or tabular column of data, and let's see how that looks like. I want to drag and drop subcategory onto rows, and let's say I want to maybe drag and drop region onto the column shelf. All right, and I want to display sales and profits for each of these subcategories and each of these regions. So that's the objective of this exercise. All right, so one of the things I'm going to make use of is the detail shelf. Now Tableau automatically imports 5 different measures or column names that are not part of a data set. On your data set, all these measures, all these dimensions and measures are available except the ones that are itemized. Measure names, measure values, the count, the latitude, and the longitude. So if you notice, these 5 column names or variables are itemized. So these, you will get this automatically imported whenever you import any data set. Lat long is optional. When it detects a geospatial field, it detects lat long values. So between 3 to 5 variables, you will automatically get irrespective of what data set you're using, right? So let me show you what measure names contains. So I'm going to click on measure names and put this right next to the regions onto the column shelf. Nothing happens visually right now. I'm going to drag and drop measure values and put this onto the text shelf. All right. So what you are seeing here is for each subcategory by each region, you're going to see all the different measures aggregated. So this is a great exploratory tool if you want to look at what are my key measures and how they are distributed with respect to my subcategories and regions or specific dimension. This is a great first-hand, high-level overview you can get about your key measures. So that's what is contained in the measure values. The measure names are just the names of these measures. All right. So I'm going to simplify this. Like I said, my intent is to show just profit and sales by subcategory and region. So I'm going to remove what I really don't need. I don't need count of orders. All right. I'm going to right click and remove it. It's going to get removed. I do not need discount. I'm going to right click, click on remove. I do need profit. I'm going to keep it there. I do not need quantity. I'm just going to right click and remove. All right. So now I'm left with subcategories, profit and sales. Now notice I can swap the sequence. I can click on region and put it right next to measure names. So think about when you would use this sort of a view versus the previous view that I showed you. So here this view is telling you by a single measure, by profit, you can compare all 4 regions, and by sales you can compare all 4 regions. But if I go back to this previous view, for every region you can compare both the profit and the sales side by side. Right? So just a simple sequence or simple swapping of the sequence lets you answer 2 questions. Okay, so think about what is the main question you're trying to answer. All right. So one of the things I wanted to touch base on real quick is the concept of the strengths of a brain. All right. So sense of a brain, how do you leverage the strength of your brain is essentially you're going to be looking at what is called as pre-attentive attributes. So pre-attentive attributes are things that a brain absorbs in advance of conscious thought. So these are simple shapes like squares, rectangles, basic building blocks of vision that our brain understands. When you see an object, light shines off the object, your brain translates that into simple building blocks of vision, and then your brain puts it back together and spits it out as a object, as an image, with adds its own interpretation. The process by which it breaks down these simple building blocks of vision, it uses these pre-attentive attributes. This is a list of the most commonly occurring pre-attentive attributes, the more commonly used pre-attentive attribute. You can vary your data by length, by width, by a different color, by a different shade of the same color, and so on. Right. So if you use any of these pre-attentive attributes, your visuals will stand out and your audience is going to understand them a lot quicker and easier. Right. So all this is great in theory, but so what? How do we actually use that in a practical scenario? I'm going to switch back to Tableau. Take a look at this table that we just created. Right. And I want you guys to answer this question for me. Which product subcategory in which region has high sales and low profits? And you have 3 seconds to answer this. 3, 2, 1. Time's up. The answer is don't even try. All right, so this visual is not meant to answer that question. So if you're trying to answer that type of a question using this visual, you're using your serial processing power of your brain. You're looking at each data point, comparing that with the next data point, navigate to the next data point, and so on. So you're looking at, you have to compare close to over 100 different marks, which is practically impossible to do it in a short period of time. I know, given that maybe 5-10 minutes you will come to this, but not in not that quickly. All right. So let's try to answer the same question using these pre-attentive attributes or a combination of some of these pre-attentive attributes in a visual. So I'm going to open up one more sheet and create a visual. So let's add subcategory. Okay. And then I'm going to add sales onto columns. Length of the bar is sum of sales. Greater the length of the bar, greater the sum of sales. All right. So you can see that visualized here. I'm going to add our slice and dices by region. So we have product subcategory. I'm going to click on region and place it onto the column shelf. So now we are seeing total sum of sales by each subcategory by each region. And again, the length of the bars correspond to sum of sales. Greater the length, greater my sum of sales. Now let's add the element of color. I'm going to click on profit and I'm going to place it on this color shelf for profit. All right, so profit onto the color shelf. And instantly a legend appears on the top right side. The legend tells you darker the orange, greater my loss, darker the blue, greater the profit. So armed with these two information, with these two pieces of information, the length of the bar tells you sum of sales, the color indicates profit. So now try to answer the same question I posed a few minutes ago. Which product subcategory in which region has high sales, low profits? Your eyes are going to immediately navigate to this big orange bar, high sales, and dark orange, low profits. So this is a simple but very efficient way to use pre-attentive attributes. All right. Let's move on. And when you think about creating the most appropriate charts, all right? So one of the things I want you all to think about is it's not a random choice that you make. Today I'm in the mood for a pie chart. Tomorrow I'm in the mood for a 3D chart, and that's how I'm going to use charts. It does not work that way. There's a very specific science behind how we go about creating charts. And there are actually two things, right? In fact, three things. One is, what is the business question you're trying to answer using that chart? And the second thing is the pre-attentive attribute that we just talked about. So this is called the McGill Cleveland scale. Right? Two researchers, Cleveland and McGill, they came up with the scale. They said, when you use some of these pre-attentive attributes like length and position along a 2D scale, it allows for more accurate comparisons. And as you go down the scale, when you start using the property of area and volume and color, you tend to use these for more high-level comparisons, right? And we can also use that to choose the chart types, right? If you want to more if you want to just create more accurate comparisons, you would end up using bar charts. If you want to look at things at a high level, you would create things like a line chart, or a tree map, things that use colors. All right. The third thing is, what is the incoming data type? All the data in this world, every data, can be classified into just two things: measures and dimensions. So we already talked about what these are. Measures are things that you can aggregate and numerically aggregate it. If it makes sense, it is a measure. If you can slice and dice something, if you're thinking about it as an attribute, a label, a categorical data, it's a dimension. So typically you would slice and dice your measure by a dimension. All right. So choosing charts ultimately depends on how many what permutations, combinations of measures and dimensions that you have. So going back to Tableau, the first chart that we created was using one dimension, one measure, bar chart. Nothing does a better job than a bar chart when you're using one dimension, one measure to display the quantitative distribution of the two variables. All right. So think about what chart you would use when you have one measure and one date field. All right. You're probably thinking time series, and you're right if you're thinking time series or line charts, right? So date and one measure. So in this case, date and maybe profits. I can use time series data. So let's try to see how we can visualize that. I'm going to click on order date onto columns, and profit, drag and drop profit onto the rows shelf. All right, so you can see profit keeps on increasing over time. One thing you want to notice about date fields is there's a plus icon right next to year. Right, and this is unique for dates. Date has an inherent hierarchy built in. So what do I mean by hierarchy is the aggregation of, excuse me, aggregation or grouping of data. Right, so the data is stored at the lowest level of detail in our data set, but Tableau automatically recognizes that it's a date field and it aggregates it at a higher level. So the highest level here is year. All right, and when I click on this plus icon once more, it expands into quarters. So what I'm now displaying is by year, by quarter, the sum of profits. And I can keep going down. All right, if I click on the plus icon once more, my quarter changes into months. So now I'm looking at year, quarter, and months. Now slowly I'm entering the territory of visual clutter. Okay, there's just too many lines to visualize. But you can break the hierarchy. So let's say I want to look at year, quarter, and month, but I don't want the quarter. It's kind of cluttering up my view. I can remove my quarter. So I can right click on the quarter and click on remove. Right, that's going to give the chart a slightly cleaner look. Right, so I just look at trends across 4 years. So whenever you're also dealing with time series data, one of the questions you're trying to ask yourselves is there a pattern that repeats itself over and over again, especially if you have time series that spans multiple years or multiple months. This effect is called seasonality, right? So when you see a pattern that repeats itself over and over again, you call that seasonality. There's a easy way to visualize seasonality. Rather than looking at 4 separate lines, left to right, I can lay these lines one on top of the other and confirm or not confirm the evidence of seasonality. I can look at seasonality a lot easier that way. And all I need to do is just a single click or single drag and drop on this view that will help me achieve that view. So I'm going to click on year and drag and drop the year onto the the color shelf. Right? And now notice what happens. Each color is represented by a year, and the months are common across my x-axis. Right? So there is some evidence of seasonality, but not that strong. I mean, you can see towards the towards March, April, profits tend to drop off, and again, it seems to pick up towards October, November, but not for all 4 years, but maybe a couple of years. Right? And then towards the end of the year, again, there are 3 years which drop off, but 1 year which really takes off. Right? So this is a quick way to look at seasonality, a lot easier. All right. Let's create one more chart. Think about what chart you will use when you have 2 measures. So when I say 2 measures, let's say I want to compare the relationship between profit and sales. The key here is relationship. Whenever you talk about relationship between 2 measures, your go-to chart type is a scatter plot. Nothing does a better job than a scatter plot to look at relationships of 2 variables. So let's create a scatter plot. So I'm going to click on sales, place it onto columns, click on profit, place it onto rows. Creates a scatter plot. But unfortunately, all we see is just one dot. Think about what this dot does. So like I told you before, Tableau automatically summarizes everything. So all we are seeing here is a sum of sales and a sum of profit, all right, for the entire data set. If you want to disaggregate the data, if you want to look at the relationship for the entire data set, there is an option that you can check on or check off. On the analysis tab, there is an option that says aggregate measures. So I'm going to check this off, and notice what happens right after that. Each data point is now a unique identifier from my data set. Every record is now plotted by a dot. Once you're looking at a scatter plot, you might start asking questions like relationships. How does one variable move with respect to the other? So you talk about correlations. So easy way to display correlation is looking at the best fit line. And the way you can draw a best fit line is right click anywhere inside the white space, of this chart. Click on trend lines and click on show trend lines. Once I do that, your line appears, and think about what is the meaning of this line. This gives you your regression equation, your R square, and all that good stuff. But essentially what this line tells you, at a high level, right, at an overall level, the more I sell, the more profits I tend to make. That's really the business meaning of this line. All right, so that's your scatter plot. All right, so let's open up one more sheet and create one more chart type where we can create a geospatial map. All right, so when you have one measure and one geospatial field like state or city, right, a map is going to be very handy to visualize that. All right, so the way you're going to create a map is I'm going to double click on state. It takes a few seconds and I get a map of the US. All right, and on the marks shelves, I'm going to click on the marks card and change it to a map so that it changes to a filled map. All right, so all the what really the colors mean here is just that I have data for these states. That's all, nothing else. All right, so let's try to add the element of color. I'm going to drag and drop profit and place it onto the color shelf. Instantly this gives me some meaning. So again, darker the blue, greater the profit, darker the orange, greater the loss, or lower the profit. I can see these states, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and they all have lower profits compared to California or Washington or New York. They all have higher sales, sorry, higher profits, right? You can also go one more level deeper. In addition to states, right, we can also go one step deeper. Now, one of the things you can do with Tableau is you can duplicate your sheets. Since I've already created a framework and I just want to tag on or add on one more component to this, I can just right click and click on duplicate. It's going to just make a copy, same exact copy of this sheet in a duplicate form. All right, so now I can add the city. Again, this is another example where my detail shelf will help me. So I'm going to click on city, drag and drop it onto the detail shelf. All right, so now each dot is now represented or representative of a city. All right, so within a state, I can look at cities. One thing you cannot do with a city, you're stuck with symbol maps where you can display them as circles. You cannot really fill these cities just like how you fill these states. So that's just one limitation. That's the lowest you can do. So till the state, you can do a filled map. Below that or beyond that, you have to switch to or it automatically switches to a circle map or a symbol map. All right, so now that we've used color for profits, there's a size shelf that we can make use of. All right, I'm going to change the marks card from map to a circle. All right, it changes to a circle. You can see the dots a lot clearly now. And I'm going to click on sales and put this on the size shelf. All right, and now if you notice, bigger the size, greater my sales, darker the blue, more my sum of profits, darker the orange, lesser my sum of profits. All right, and in this example, at least, there are just some spots, some dots that stand out. All right, and if you want to see some of these tinier dots to be more pronounced, one of the things you can do is click on the size shelf, and maybe so a slider opens up, and you can maybe slowly increase the size. All right, so to maybe see it a lot better, but it is proportionate. All the other sizes are going to also increase proportionately. All right, so this is a good chart to start off with, but again, to make more sense of the details, some of these smaller dots are really hard to see. So this is where we're going to make use of a dashboard where we can interact with it and then just see a specific portion of the charts or display for a specific criteria and then make sense out of it. All right, so this is one of those charts where it will make sense to look at it from in a two-step perspective. First step, high-level overview. Then next step is into a more drill-down mode where it's going to help us generate insights. All right, so I think we have enough charts. Let's create a dashboard. All right, and before you create a dashboard, all right, like I told you earlier, there are some specific design principles you have to keep in mind when creating a dashboard. All right, this is also a dashboard. What's wrong with this? I can probably speak for another hour on just what is wrong with this dashboard. The point I'm trying to make here is just because you string things together on a single display does not constitute a well-designed dashboard. Pay attention to it. One of the first things you want to think about is the layout. Where do you want to keep your dashboards? Where do you want to keep your views? The top left side is typically where your users' eyes are going to first go to. And then either we typically read in a Z fashion or an N fashion. But typically towards the bottom right is where most of us, right, most of our eyes are going to go towards that. So think of this as establishing that element of visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy meaning where you see first, where do your eyes go first, where do they go next, what is the last thing that you want your users to view. The other thing you want to keep in mind when creating dashboard is these four things: position and color. So position, again, most important, least important in terms of the visual hierarchy. Color, I cannot emphasize the importance of color enough. Again, I've seen countless scenarios where people have used the same color to depict different things. On one chart, they have used profits as orange and green. On another chart, they've used sales and they've depicted orange and green. All right. So again, when you bring them on a dashboard, you have to bring in separate legends to it. All right. So try to maintain uniformity. Okay, that's really what the color aspect means. Size and shape, again, are meant to establish that visual hierarchy. If you're planning for a map of the US that's wide, you want to plan a shape or plan the layout of a dashboard that goes left to right. If you're planning a map of India that goes top to bottom, right, you have to plan a dashboard that goes tall and narrow. Right, so think of these as elements of visual hierarchy. So let's create a dashboard. So far we've been creating new sheets by clicking on this plus icon. Right next to this, you see there's another plus with 4 squares. All right, and that's going to open up the layout for a dashboard. All right, and if you notice on my screen, at least the white canvas, this is where my dashboard is going to fall. Right. I have a lot of gray space here where I don't, this is really unused space. Now, some of you, if you're opening it up on your laptop, so I have a big screen monitor, it's about a 30 to 33 inch, I think. So it doesn't, I still have some more space, but if you're viewing it on a smaller laptop, you might see some scrolls either on the right side or on the bottom side. So to avoid scrolls, and what I would recommend is when you're working with a dashboard for the first time, make sure that your entire screen is filled with the canvas. The white space that you see here is the actual canvas. This is where you're going to see all your visuals. So on the desk size option, click on whatever is the default selection. By default, the desktop browser is enabled. And right under that, there's an option that says fixed size. I'm going to click on fixed size and click on automatic. All right, if I click on automatic, notice what happens. My entire screen is now filled with this white space. And if you're doing this on a laptop, if you had scrolls earlier or scroll bars earlier, they should go away. All right, so once I have these sheets in here, the next thing I can do on a dashboard is I can start bringing in the visuals that I've created. All right, so let me bring in some of them. The first one that we created with the bars and the colored bars, I can just drag and drop. So it's as simple as that. I can just drag and drop and place the first view anywhere inside this gray space or white space here. The minute I let go of my mouse, it's going to get populated. All right, as simple as that. Let's try to add another view. Let's say I want to add my, I can add the scatter plot. All right, I can just drag and drop. Notice when I start adding the second components, all right, I'm going to navigate with my mouse. All right, it's going to go, depending on where I let go of my mouse, it's going to get dropped there. All right, so the gray colored shaded region gives you a visual guide. So if you let go of your mouse in that spot, this is where my new view is going to get placed. And you can move your mouse around. If I go towards the bottom, this is where my new view is going to get created. All right. So placing the second objects, or after the first one that you've created, you just use the gray colored guides to establish where you want to place that second object. So I want to place it right below here. I'm going to let go of my mouse. There you go. That's my scatter plot. Let's add a third view. Let's bring in our the cities, the map of the cities. All right, I'm just going to drag and drop it. I don't want it here. I don't want it. You notice, I mean, I'm scrolling pretty quickly, right? So as I scroll over the dashboard, I can quickly get a visual sense or visual guide of where I want to place my next item. All right, so I can just place it right next to this and let go of my mouse. It's going to get populated there. All right. Now, so let's say I have these three components on my dashboard, right? And think about when a dashboard really helps you. So when you're seeing unrelated pieces of information on a single display, that's going to give you a great overview of what a dashboard is going to look like. So you can individually, the map is going to give you something. Individually, this sheet is going to give you something. Individually, this scatter plot is going to give you something. But the advantage of looking at all three together in a dashboard is you can connect the dots, so to speak. You can look at the interactions among all three and see how is one doing with respect to the other. So you can get a holistic view of different aspects of a business. That's really the use of a dashboard. I can also, I don't like scrolls on my dashboard. So one thing I can do to get rid of scrolls is I can resize some of these objects. I can just click on the guide and just remove, adjust the size so that way it can resize it automatically. All right. So one of the things I can also do in my dashboard is make it interactive. That's really the key here, right? So this is static. While that's also useful, its use is going to amplify when I make it interactive. So the way I'm going to make it interactive is I'm going to click anywhere inside the white space of this dashboard so that that's active. The window is active. And on the top right side, there is an option that says use as filter. Okay, it looks like a filter icon. I click on it once, notice what happens, it turns white in color. This is a toggle option. So meaning if I click on it again by mistake, it turns transparent back in color. So make sure it's selected till it turns white. That's when the interactivity is enabled. All right. So now going back to our earlier question that we talked about, tables in the East, right? So that was one of our worst selling products, worst profit making, but high sales, right? And if you want to know what's happening there, if you want to get, if you want to deep dive into maybe some of the reasons why we are having such a high loss in tables in the East and what's going on there, at least with respect to this dashboard, notice what happens if I click on this bar. All right, if I click on this bar, if you notice what happened, my entire view or the other two views is filtered just for tables in the East. The scatter plot is just looking at tables in the East. These cities are just tables in the East. I can see this big red dot, which is New York City. That's one of my highest loss-making cities. And then so is Philadelphia. In fact, all of the cities here are high loss-making products. All of them are orange in color. All right, at least most of the big ones. All right. So you can click on any bar and kind of generate insights like this. I can click on accessories, or maybe I can click on maybe a different part of the country, right? Maybe tables. Let's look at tables in the West, right? I do see some bright spots. I can see Seattle is a good market to sell my tables. And there's some cities in California and maybe Nevada where I can sell my tables. And so in some of these states as well. I can see San Francisco is not great in terms of profitability, but overall, looks like Washington State is a great area to sell tables profitably. All right. So I can click on any one of these bars. So go back to my original view. I just press escape. It takes us back to the original view. I can also interact not just by clicking on the bars, but I can also click on the actual subcategory as a whole. So notice what happens if I click on this tables subcategory. I just click on that. The view that you see below is just for tables across all 4 regions. All right, across all 4 regions, looks like the more we sell, the more money we lose, which is not really a good thing. And in terms of the overall sales, looks like New York is still one of the highest sales and lowest profits. But again, to an earlier point, we saw Seattle has a nice counterbalancing effect, but maybe not that. It's not enough. All right, but there's still some hope for tables. Looks like there's a nice scattering of blue around. All right. So this is one way to interact with your data. The other thing you can also do is, in addition to clicking on the actual subcategories, we can maybe click on a specific region, right? Notice what happens if I click on maybe the Eastern region. This is for all product subcategories in the East. I can see where my biggest selling items are. Again, New York happens to be good. Overall, New York is good, considering tables is one of the worst profit making, but still we make money as a whole in the Eastern region. Compare that to the South, right? You can see a whole different view altogether. Right. So this is how you would enable interactivity in a dashboard, right? With just 3 clicks or 4 clicks, right? I just dragged 3 sheets, just clicked on the use as filter. So with literally 4 clicks, you can create an interactive dashboard. Right. Last thing I want to talk about, right, before I open it up for questions, is storytelling. So storytelling, like I said earlier, one of the most efficient ways of storytelling is the understanding of data ink and non-data ink components. In any visual, it's made up of 2 things: data ink components and non-data ink components. So non-data ink components are things like your titles, your subtitles, your text, your annotation, your legends, your comments, your tooltips. So things that enhance your visuals, so things that tell something extra about what your data does not already contain. So these are called non-data ink elements, and these are great ways to actually enhance your storytelling abilities. I'll show you how you can customize your tooltips, and it gives you that nice narrative that actually starts it gives you it engages a user very nicely. So let me go back to this sheet, right? This sheet 3, where we created this bar chart, and I'll show an example of what this does. Right now, if I hover over my mouse, that's a tooltip. This is your regular standard boring tooltip, which almost no one even realizes that there's a tooltip that's available, and they just glance over this. But what if I can customize this tooltip, right, in the form of a sentence that's easily relatable to people? So what I want this tooltip to read is, when I hover over this, I want this to say, copiers in the East sells so and so with a profit of so and so. So that's kind of what I want this tooltip to read when someone hovers over this mouse. And when someone hovers over this object, I want this to automatically change it to East and tables and that particular profit and sales. So the way I would do that is click on this tooltip. I'm going to get rid of all of this default crap. All right, just delete that. I don't need any of that default options. We're going to create our own tooltip. You can combine your custom tooltip with static text and dynamic text. All right. So I'm going to say, so like I said earlier, if I hover over this, it should say accessories in the central region. So accessories is a dynamic view. It's a dynamic field. So the way I'm going to bring in dynamic fields is click on the Insert tab and click on the subcategory name. It's going to put the subcategory name in brackets. So accessories in the, I want this to read, if someone hovers over this, I want this to read accessories in the central region. So central again is a dynamic view, is a dynamic field. I'm going to click on Insert and click on Region. So categories, accessories in the central region, right, has total or sales of whatever the total sales value is. I'm going to click on insert, click on sum of sales. All right. So let's see how this looks like. So there you go. So it's customized for accessories in central region. If I hover over with my mouse to any other chart, the tooltip automatically changes depending on where I choose this. So to enhance this even further, I like to de-emphasize my static text and emphasize my dynamic text. So that way, whatever is changing just catches the user's eye. All right. So notice what happens is just a simple change will be very effective. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to click on tooltip again. I'm going to de-emphasize the static text. I'm going to click on I'm going to unbold it. I'm going to change it to a lighter gray. I'm going to do the same thing for the next set of text, which is static. I'm going to unbold it. I'm going to change it to a lighter gray font. All right. Now, if you notice, chairs central the sales amount. Right, so these are the things that pop up. So this becomes very useful as when the user hovers over this, right? It's going to just give you that easy and nice visual effect to communicate the story even better. All right. So this is how you would enhance your views with custom tooltips or dynamic tooltips. I'm also going to show you one more really cool thing before I open it up for questions, kind of related. So in addition to creating text-based tooltips, you can create another type of tooltip, which is going to be very useful. So let me show you what I mean. Let me show you real quick what I mean by that. Click on tooltip again and go down, make some space here. And I'm going to go to the insert tab and click on sheet. All right. And I'm going to click on this sheet 6, which is my map, which is my cities. Right. I'm going to click on that. And it populates some text here. Click OK. And now notice what happens if I hover with my mouse. Right, I'll give it a minute or a second or two. What you're now seeing, I don't know if you guys realize this, but what you're seeing here is a chart within a chart. If I hover with my mouse over that bar, the chart that you're seeing is a map of the cities for just tables in the east. And that's dynamic. If I go to tables in the west, okay, it automatically filters for tables in the west, the cities chart. All right. And you can do this for any bar chart. If you just hover with your mouse over any bar, it's going to dynamically change it for the view. All right. So this is called a visual tooltip. So this is actually a chart inside a chart. All right. So one of the really great way to enhance your stories and add that extra narrative. Right. So this is what I wanted to really kind of cover in the few minutes that I wanted to that we had together. Hopefully, this gives you a sense of high level a concept of what Tableau can do. What are some of the scientific principles behind creating charts, telling stories, and dashboards. I know we've just scratched the surface, but the intent of this talk was to get your juices flowing, just to start thinking about visuals and why we create visuals. It's ultimately not about the tool, it's about how we communicate information to the audience. Right. So that said, I'll stop talking for some time. I know I've been talking nonstop for about an hour. So I'll open it up for questions. Again, if there are any questions till this point regarding Tableau or any concepts or about me, I'm open for questions for the next few minutes.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one being how to create measures and dimension table.
How to create measures and dimensions table.
Yeah.
So the measures and dimensions are automatically populated. Right. I don't know if that was the question, but let me show you what I mean by that. So when I import a data set for the first time, so if I open up a blank workbook, right? I won't have meshes and dimensions unless I import. So it's going to be blank. So you have to connect to a data set. You have to bring in the data set. So all the meshes and dimensions are basically your data sets. It's the labels of a data set. So this is how a blank workbook will look like, because I don't have any connections yet. So once I connect to a data set and bring in the data, that's when your measures and dimensions will come up.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Another question. What data sources does Tableau support? Does it support JSON documents?
So if you think about, let me share my screen here. I'll show you the different types of sources it can support. Okay. Just give me one moment while I just open up a blank workbook. Let me share my screen. So I don't think it supports JSON documents right off the bat, but if you want to get a sense of what all different data sources it does connect to, if you click on this connect data source, so here is a whole host of um, online cloud-based sources it connects to. I don't think JSON is an inbuilt, but if you have an ODBC connection and if you know how to configure it, that's probably one way to connect to other non-standard data sources. Right? But these are typically the inbuilt or native connectors that Tableau can connect to directly. But unfortunately, I don't see JSON in this.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir. I think with that we're out of questions.
Okay.
Although we have a comment for you by one of our viewers saying wonderful session.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for the informative session. And on behalf of Excel and Excel, I thank you for taking time and sharing your wisdom.
Great, great. No, thanks so much. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity, guys. Really enjoy the work that you guys are doing, and good luck with your endeavors.
Thank you, sir. It's a
All right.
pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will also like to extend a thanks to all the participants for your time and support. We appreciate you being here. Hope the session was useful.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. We do have a couple of announcements. Excel is glad to inform you that we are conducting a learning course that will help you to upskill yourself and will help you become indispensable during these trying times. EIE Learning is a set of handpicked online courses conducted by working professionals, curated on a gamut of subjects starting from Tally to Excel and Analyst to Power BI. Some of our courses for the month of November are Financial Modeling in Excel for Beginners, which is a 24 hours course starting from 21st November, and Custom Analytics in Power BI, a 14-hour course starting from 23rd November, and an Excel Essential course, a 20-hour course starting from 30th November. We will also be having a course on Tableau in the month of January. The course will be instructed by our today's speaker, Shaam Ramamurthy. The course and payment details will be mentioned within the next week. Interested participants can register from the link displayed on the screen. An announcement for all regarding our upcoming Fresh Talks. On 20th November, we have a session on sending text messages, WhatsApp messages using Google Sheets and Android phone by Jitendra Bhatt. And on 27th November, we have a session on best practices for data model size optimization in Power BI by Nicola Eilert. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you in our next session. Do not forget to like the video, and for more updates, subscribe to our channel. To know more on EIE Fresh Talk, use the link in the description box. Stay tuned for more Fresh Talk. Have a happy weekend, and thank you all.